Hello, everyone, and you welcome another appointment with Progress Over Perfection. Today, I want to talk about something I'm very interested about. I'm here with Darren Reynolds from Every Daughter's Matters. I know they have some work in Nepal. Hello, Darren. How are you?
Good morning, Matt. I'm doing well. Thanks. Yourself?
Very good. Can you tell us what is Every Daughter Matter?
Yeah. So, look, it's a fairly self-descriptive name, as you can imagine, but it obviously needs some context. So, we are an Australian-based, not an NGO, so a not-for-profit, and we work along Nepal's border with India, and we effectively are helping prevent human trafficking, so young women and children being trafficked from Nepal into India, of which current figures that we have is about 20 to 25,000 every year. So that makes it one of the busiest human trafficking routes on the planet. And we're rescuing between 130 and 140 young women and children, predominantly girls, each month.
Wow, 25,000 people.
Yeah.
Across the border between Nepal and India only.
Yes.
It's incredible. Every year.
It's devastating, isn't it? Yes.
It's devastating.
Yeah.
And can you tell us what is the founding story? What was the moment where first, who is the founder, and how this person started this journey?
Yeah, so we're talking about Ross Nancaro. Ross is he's an Australian. He's based in Port Macquarie in New South Wales. Did spend some time in Perth, where I'm based as well, in his younger years, and then revisited later in life. Look, he was in Nepal doing that, and you have to explain. I just need to say up front, I'm an Australian, so I say Nepal. When I'm over there, it's Nepal. And occasionally you get Nepal, so that you get excuse my varying pronunciations of the word, but Ross was in Nepal when about 6 odd years ago, doing some humanitarian work up there, and saw the reality of human trafficking firsthand. Came across a group called Ashish Social Service Nepal. They were an indigenous group who were running a surveillance booth on the border at one point, and they were rescuing, I believe, around 3 to 4 girls every month that were being caught up in human trafficking. And effectively, he was so impressed with what they were doing and the model that they had, and effectively said, how could we expand this? What's the best way we can move forward with this? And they said, if we can replicate this model across the border. There's currently about 35 official crossing points between Nepal and India, so there's room for at least 35 points where we could operate to stop the people. We're currently at 13, so in about 6 years we've gone from 1 booth to 13, and we're in the process of expanding as we speak.
Wow! So you are halfway on doing
towards that,
all of them.
Yeah.
And how many people you can save at the moment?
Yeah, as I said, so the official rescues last year, 1,572 documented rescues.
Wow.
And look, we're very careful about that number. We don't want to, we want to be absolutely transparent and authentic to our supporters. And there was early days, there was some confusion in the reporting because local people obviously have a different, I guess, filter to what we have. So we actually had to go back and revise the reporting model, so we can say with absolute conviction that 1,572 documented cases of girls who are not being exploited in India because of our presence on that border. Just last year. So we've gone over 5,000 in 6 years.
Wow, it's incredible. And you, Darren, how you got involved in this?
So my career, pretty much straight out of school, was in radio production or in audio engineering. Was originally in a recording studio, and then ended up in a radio station as the production manager. Firstly down in Bunbury in southwest WA, and then back in Perth. So that career was about 18 years, and in the latter part of that, I was invited by a church group that was doing some work up in Cambodia, and they wanted somebody to come and document what they were doing. They said, "You're in media. Grab a camera, come up and film us." And I went, "I'm a radio producer, not a videographer, but I guess the shoe fits or doesn't fit well." So I actually borrowed a camera and went up. And Mauro, seeing extreme poverty for the first time in my life, having grown up in a very sheltered environment here in Perth, was confronting. And I think one of the finer points on that was going to visit a rubbish tip outside of Phnom Penh and seeing children, young children, sifting through rubbish looking for food was an image you never, never forget. And in that moment, I thought, this is as bad as it gets. But I was wrong, because I actually then came to discover that there are people who see that as an opportunity. And that's the single biggest driver of human trafficking, is people who are so vulnerable that somebody else can exploit them for their own needs. That is the push factor. So I witnessed that firsthand. It shook me. But where it really changed was when I went back to get more footage so that was 2005. 2006, I went back to get more, because I needed more footage to visually tell the story we were trying to tell. And I went to a rescue centre run by an Australian couple who were looking after girls that had been rescued out of the sex trade, that had been trafficked. And I met an 8-year-old girl that, man, that hit hard. And particularly, I think personally, because my daughter Cassie was 8. And yeah, it hits close to home when you realise the predicament that other fathers are in, where they're having to face selling their children. And I didn't know what to do with that. So that was a confronting moment, because I came back quite lost and came back to Perth and went, what do I do with that? So I ended up working with World Vision for 8 years, running I don't know if you ever came across the 40-hour famine in your time. It was
No.
a bit of a rite of passage in WA. It was children giving up food for 40 hours and raising money to give to World Vision to work in poverty alleviation. Then, long story short, Salvation Army for a number of years, then another rescue agency, which I'm so grateful for my time there, because I was exposed to where these girls end up. So I had seen where they started from, and I also then had the opportunity in Thailand to go and do some undercover work amongst some really professional people who were working with local police to go and rescue girls out of bars and clubs. And the youngest I met was 14, who was doing sex work in a particular club we visited, and it was instrumental in an operation that helped rescue her. But I think at the end of the day, look, as a dad, I wouldn't want my daughter, obviously, to experience anything that those girls have gone through. Not only is it an expensive and a difficult and dangerous operation to go and rescue them, they may never heal from the trauma that they've been through. What I love about Every Daughter Matters, and what has drawn me to this organisation, is between the rubbish tip and the extreme poverty and the brothels and the clubs and the nightlife that is the single biggest pull factor of human trafficking, is an opportunity to interrupt that journey and get them home safely before the trauma happens, and before there's the shame factor is too significant for families to take the girls back. So I love what we do, and it's more about prevention than the cure.
Yeah, because there is this factor as well. So if this girl have the trauma, then they cannot back in their homes.
That's right.
Because they are not valuable
Particularly
anymore.
in Asia. Yeah.
Particularly in Asia.
Yep.
And what is the main way trafficker take young kids, young children to India from Nepal? What is the main way?
We all probably get in our minds these images, and Hollywood would promote this thing of there being chloroformed and tied up and put in a boot and driven across. More, and certainly where we operate in Nepal, it is more they're playing on the fact that these girls want a better life. All they need to do, they don't need to go through all that risk and all that planning. All they need to do is offer a big enough carrot and say, come over here and you'll get this. And the biggest things will be employment. It'll be love interest. So we've got a culture over there it's big on arranged marriages where you don't have a choice of who you marry. Your family set that up, which works in a lot of cases. But you and I understand the value of a love marriage and a love relationship, and that is very enticing for these girls to think that they can go to somebody who loves them. And look, it's overwhelmingly a trick. It is not what they're going to. They're being very very rarely coerced, or it's more about false promises. And
Mm.
once they cross that border, this is so alarming. Only about 2 to 3% actually ever get rescued or are able to return.
Wow. No, especially if the arranged marriage is between 8 years old child
Yeah. Yep.
and an adult somewhere in
Yes.
India,
Yeah. Well,
somewhere
it's
another
actually
place.
more
Yeah.
arranged marriages in Nepal. So, they're trying to escape that to go
Yeah.
into India. Yeah.
Wow. And what was your experience when you met this young girl, uh,
Mhm.
8 years old girl? What was your feelings toward that, and what moved you? What make you think I can do better?
Mm. Look, the moment was we had arranged to meet this couple. So I had, as I mentioned before, I went in 2005. It was effectively 12 months between the first visit and the second visit. And the significant thing that happened between those two visits is a couple of friends of mine from WA had seen an ad in the paper for a particular rescue agency that needed someone to go and start a rescue home. The husband in this case was a nurse, and he was married to a teacher. So there was kind of this nice symbiotic relationship where he would look after the physical needs and she would look after education and things. So between those two trips, they sold everything. Incredibly brave, and hats off to anybody who engages in this sort of thing. And there's a lot of people that do and go under the radar. They sold everything here in Australia, moved to Cambodia, went to a place called Kampong Cham, which is a fairly industrial city in rural Nepal, Cambodia. So when I went back, they had been there I believe about 6 months, and I contacted them and said, I'd love to include you in the story that we're telling because you're Australians doing this incredible work. And so they sent us the address. We hired a van and a driver, took a couple of other blokes with me. We drove out there, got to the address, and immediately, I don't know in hindsight really what I was expecting, but I was not expecting to drive up to a padlock gate with walls that had been embedded broken glass in them to prevent people climbing the wall over the wall. And so I texted him. I said, "Mate, we're here. Have we got the right place?" And he said, "Yeah, we'll come and let you in." So he came and unlocked the gates. We drove in. He locked the gates behind us. And my first question was, "What's with all the security?" And he said, "There are guys with guns and knives trying to get these girls back." And yes, it was. I went, "Oh wow, okay." And suddenly you're right in the thick of this stuff. And he did a tour of the facility. Now it was very Cambodian style. They weren't living really a Western lifestyle at this point. They were, they just fitted in beautifully. But as he's touring around, we went out the back of the building, and it was a 2-story building. There was a kitchen preparation area, so where they prepare the food, and there was another kitchen inside, but this was the prep area. So he went out and showed us that. And as we was walking back in, he said, "Yesterday was really interesting. We had a girl on the roof of the second story up there threatening to throw herself off. There was wind and rain, and it was a really dangerous situation." He said, "Thank God we were able to talk her down, but that's how she was dealing with her trauma. Even though she'd been rescued, she was still had the nightmares. She still had all the mental trauma, physical trauma." And he said, "This is just another day in the life of what we do here." Now, that was a moment, and so I'm still dealing with that. He took us upstairs and showed us the accommodation that they had for the girls, the different rooms, and it was just beautiful. They were just being beautifully looked after. They had Cambodian staff, and now, being a male nurse, he didn't have a lot of filters, so he was telling me some of the horror stories what has happened to these girls
Mm.
physically. And look, I'm just not prepared to go into that at this point, but it's something you never forget. While he's describing that and how they get recruited, how they get found, and all this sort of stuff. So that's why I can speak with some knowledge on this. While he's doing that, this girl puts her face around the corner of the room and smiles at me, and I waved and smiled at her. And he said, "Oh, yeah, this girl's." He told me a name, and he said she's been with us for a couple of weeks. She's been through in horrific torture, almost the situations. He said she's only 8. Man, that landed hard because my daughter Cassie was 8, and it was like somebody stabbed me in the chest. I couldn't breathe. And I remember sitting in the back of the van driving back to Phnom Penh later. Thankfully, somebody else was driving because I lost it. I came undone. And the hardest thing was going, what do I do with that? And I think a lot of people experience that to some level. You see something that is just clearly so wrong, that's so unjust, and you don't know what you can do about it with your skill set, with your life experience. And that was, a difficult time because I remember waking up one night just crying because I had this image of, and I'll say a name. Her name was Lacanar. I had this image of Lacanar burned in my brain, and I remember my wife rolling over and saying, "What's going on?" And I said, I don't know what to do with that. She's kind of haunting me, and so I end up, that's how the job with World Vision came about. I applied for a role there, and loved that because it really gave me a better understanding of the desperation that people experience in these parts of the world that you and I, God forbid, would never experience. When I go into schools and talk to kids, I'm going, this is a desperation that you and I will never know. And I love that they're helping alleviate that, but I've been more and more drawn to, yes, that's happening and there's rescues happening, but what a great opportunity here with what Every Daughter Matters is doing at that point of interception. And I think the other metaphor I tend to use is there's 2 ways to save a drowning man. One is to pull him out of the water. The other is to stop him falling in. And when we're talking about falling in for these girls, we're talking something way more horrific than just getting wet, right?
Yeah.
So I think, we all would understand the prevention in this case is so much better than the cure.
Wow. So crazy to think, and make me mad thinking about this stuff. Um, it's interesting because a few weeks ago I was in a Uber driver, and this guy was from India, and we were talking about these things, and I don't know why we reached the point to talk about these things in Uber driver, but uh, he told me about in New Delhi there is these buildings, 7, 8, 9 store buildings where there's all prostitute,
Mm-hmm.
and the majority prostitute are minors. So the majority, there's a lot of girls, he was saying, and get kidnapped or taken away from the farm in outside the cities with the promise of a job in the city. They enter in these buildings and they never get out.
Yeah.
Nobody see them ever again.
Yes.
And it's horrible that this is happening under our eyes and nobody say anything about this.
Yeah. Yep. And that plays back into that stat I said before, where only 2 to 3% ever return home. I think Nepali girls are, unfortunately, it's a perfect storm for them because they are so vulnerable and so naive. And once they cross that border, and this is I think the thing about human trafficking is when you take somebody out of their family, they're immediately more vulnerable. As soon as you take them out of their community, that's another level of vulnerability. And then when you start crossing borders and you're talking now, they don't even speak the same language anymore. They don't know the geography of the land. getting home gets exponentially harder once you start crossing international borders, and so they're not even necessarily, although often are, chained to beds or kept in locked rooms, because they wouldn't know what to do anyway, and often, unfortunately, local authorities are can be part of the problem. If they go to the local authorities, they may end up back where they were, because everybody's in on it, trying to, police are trying to feed their own families as well, and this is again, poverty is just I just hate poverty. Poverty will make people do things they would never dream of doing if they weren't lacking.
Who are the perpetrator? Well, men, female,
Um,
adult, kids, Westerns people, Asian people. Who are the
yeah,
people in this work in Nepal, of course?
yeah. Look, it is overwhelmingly Indian men who are driving it. They will use women in the process to, and again, if a girl is approached by a woman, um, she's less likely to be suspicious, because why would a woman do this to a girl? But if that woman's on the payroll and is desperate and needing to feed her kids or whatever, she will sacrifice someone else's child. That again, look, it's easy to sit in judgment, and you mentioned before you were feeling angry, and I identify with that. And I think if we were to eliminate two things, poverty and greed, this stuff wouldn't happen. People get caught up in this, and I've met a brothel madam over in Thailand who seemed like the most lovely person in the world, and yet she was pimping out three of these underage girls in a bar that we were in, and you want to punch them in the face, but you're only punching the tip of the iceberg, right?
But these people pay when they get caught, or not really?
Yes, yeah, that's getting better. I think you've heard the phrase "it takes a village to raise a child." In terms of human trafficking, I love that there's a lot of interaction between different agencies, and there's a lot of cooperation. So where you and I guess even beyond human trafficking, in poverty alleviation. So if World Vision and Oxfam and Red Cross and those sort of guys are out working in communities to ensure that there's clean drinking water, that takes away one level of vulnerability. Then if you've got people like us stopping human trafficking at the border, but then you've got other people who will go and rescue them if they do go in. And then you've got people like International Justice Mission, who are a big international organization, another NGO, who have done a lot, I believe, in the rescue space, and that's certainly where I was first came across them. But now I understand their focus is more around the court systems and making sure that prosecutions stick and that people are being held to account. Now, at that 1,572 rescues we did last year, I believe it's something like 1,530 something of those were referred to local police in Nepal along the border. We stand alongside the police at those border crossing points. We will not set up a surveillance booth and staff it with Nepali staff unless there is a police presence there, because of the risk, obviously.
Can be dangerous for you as well as an organization.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
So, and then when there is an interception and the trafficker is with them, we have instant access to the police. And just give you a quick, I guess, an anecdote on that. I was at a particular border crossing. I think it was fairly over to the west of the country, but still on the southern border. It was a particularly bad crossing point in terms of human trafficking, and I went into our little surveillance booth. So we have these blue booths that where the girls operate from, and they're just tin huts effectively, but they stand out, and they're right there. I went into the booth just to get some photos and had our staff working at the desk there, and I was photographing through trying to see through the windows so we could see the border crossing. That's how close we were. And as I was doing that, the staff intercepted a tuk-tuk or an auto with one. I think it was only the one guy and about 3 or 4 girls, and quite young. So either around 18, maybe some might have been a couple of underage. And they stopped them, and our staff have the power to stop and detain for a brief period of time. if they want to go, we can't stop them, but we have the authority to stop them and use that opportunity to ask questions. And they brought them back to the surveillance booth. The next thing, they're coming into the booth, and I'm still in there, so I'm sort of trapped in the back corner, trying to be a little bit invisible here. And they're all laughing, and I went, okay, this seems all right. But I don't speak Nepali. I'm just in the process of learning the alphabet at the moment, so I can actually get some language skills. But I didn't understand what was going on, but I felt the mood shift, and I saw the body language change. They were starting to get hostile towards our staff because they were not liking the questions, is how I interpreted it. And in that moment, I was sort of caught like, I may have to get involved here simply because I'm trapped here. And probably not a great thing for a Westerner to be involved in a local thing like that. So I was, sort of weighing up what the wisdom of the moment was. But honestly, I looked up and I saw through the window, and there were two police officers coming over from the other side of the road. They had seen the same thing and obviously heard something. And I was like, right, I'm invisible. I'm out, and they dealt with it. I don't even know that it was particularly a human trafficking moment. It was more that they were just taking exception to the questions that were being asked. And I think they were waved on it after that. But it was just an interesting insight as to how it happens. And as soon as there was any sort of hostility, the police stepped in and were on our side there. Last year in July, we actually received a national award from the most senior police officer in Nepal. He's the Inspector General of Nepal Police. And we got photos of it because it was a lovely ceremony. And it wasn't to us as our Western staff, it was to our local staff. So Yuvraj is the guy who runs operations over there. So it was him and some other senior leaders. And we've got this national award recognising the work that we're doing at the border. So we're definitely wanting to work with the police and are effectively doing that. Yeah.
Mm. Wow. Okay, look, Darren, we are at the end of this first part of this 4-part interview about the beautiful things that you do with Every Daughters Matter. Thank you so much. And listeners, stay tuned and let's look at the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
Okay.